In the autumn of the Pacific War, a new American bomber began to appear on Japanese skies, a massive four-engine aircraft designed to fly where enemy fighters could not. For many Japanese pilots, the first sight of this machine at extreme altitude was a shock. It was operating well above the ceiling where their fighters were effective. That gap, technology and altitude, changed the contest over Japan. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress was a leap forward in bomber design. It was built to reach high altitude, to carry heavy loads over vast distances, and to strike the enemy homeland. Designed for strategic bombing, it entered service in 1944 and began staging operations against Japan from remote bases. Its range and ceiling allowed the United States Army Air Forces to reach targets that had previously been safe. Fighters and fighters' engines of the early war were optimized for certain altitudes. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was a superb dogfighter at low and medium altitudes, light, maneuverable, lethal in the hands of trained pilots. But it was not optimized for sustained high-altitude interception. Performance dropped, engines labored, and the aircraft lost its edge. When B-29s climbed into the thinner air above 25,000 to 30,000 feet, the Zeros could not easily follow. The result was a tactical problem that Japanese air defenses had not fully solved. In pilot reports and diaries, airmen recorded the surprise of seeing heavy four-engine bombers so high above them. Some accounts describe fighters struggling to intercept, seeing silhouettes against the sun, and finding their guns ineffective at range. The B-29's operational altitude forced defenders to attempt new tactics, scrambling interceptors to higher altitudes, relying more on flak, and searching for weaknesses in the bomber formations. On several early raids, B-29 formations climbed above the effective reach of many Japanese fighters. On June 15, 1944, the first B-29 raid on Yawata demonstrated the bomber's reach. The mission was costly and imperfect, but it foreshadowed how range and altitude could be used to strike the Japanese home islands. As the campaign grew, so did the civilian and industrial impact, and Japan was forced to adapt to a new airborne threat. Flying high was not without cost. B-29s needed complex engines, turbo superchargers, and careful maintenance. The Superfortress could reach 30,000 feet and above, but crews wrestled with engine fires and the strain of long climbs. At high altitude, crews faced harsh cold. Gun turrets and remote controls were mechanical wonders, but required work. Meanwhile, Japanese meteorologists knew about strong, high-altitude winds, the jet stream, and those winds would complicate bombing accuracy. The interplay of technology, weather, and logistics defined the air war. As the raids continued, Japanese forces experimented with higher-altitude intercepts, night fighters, radar detection, and searchlights. Anti-aircraft gun sites were redeployed, and civilian defenses strengthened. Still, the combination of technological limits and industrial strain made a complete solution difficult. The B-29 remained a strategic lever that increasingly eroded Japan's industrial capacity. For crewmen in the B-29, the missions were long, dangerous, and technical. For civilians below, the sight of huge flying fortresses and the fires they left behind became a terrible new reality. Archive testimony from survivors and veterans, letters, photographs, grainy film, reflect the human toll behind the technical story. The bomber's altitude may have shielded it from fighters, but it could not shield civilians from the consequences of strategic bombing. Ultimately, the B-29 campaign became one element in a larger strategy that included low-altitude incendiary raids, mining operations, and, later, atomic strikes. High-altitude capability had forced Japan to stretch its defenses and reassess priorities. The psychological shock noted by pilots, seeing enemy bombers where fighters could not reach, underscored a strategic imbalance the Japanese high command could not easily reverse. The story of the Superfortress and the shocked pilots who first saw it is not simply a tale of machines. It is a story of changing technology, of adaptation under strain, and of the human beings on both sides who made decisions with incomplete information. Those grainy photographs and pilot reports tell us how air power can shift a war and remind us why history must be preserved in images and testimony.